It was reported in the Hendersonville Times-News in North Carolina this week that the state's Republican Senator Richard Burr told an alarming anecdote to a local Chamber of Commerce group when he addressed them on Monday. He said as the credit crisis started last fall, after talking to then Treasury Secretary Hank Paulson, he phoned his wife from Washington and told her to go as fast as she could, as many times as she could, to take out as much cash as she could from their bank's ATM. He reacted to news of the financial crisis, in other words, by trying to make a run on his bank before all the money was gone. What's worse, in recounting that anecdote to his constituents as their senator, which he now says he has done multiple times, Senator Burr is in effect suggesting that a run on the banks might be a reasonable response to the financial crisis. This, of course, is an embarrassing story for a senator who, even before this happened, was probably going to face a tough time getting reelected next year. Unsurprisingly, the story has percolated this week in his home state press and nationally. Senator Burr has been asked to explain what he was thinking, and Republican officials have started now to respond to the scandal as well. And that is where this story takes a very unlikely turn. Republican officials, both in North Carolina and in Washington, have decided to respond to the Richard Burr called for a run on the bank scandal by themselves calling for a run on the banks. Yeah, the chair of the Henderson County Republican Party told the Hendersonville Times-News, quote, "Many Americans took out some extra cash as a common sense precaution during that period." Everyone was making a run on the banks. That was common sense. In Washington, the spokesman for the National Republican Senatorial Committee, which has the unenviable task of trying to re-elect Senator Burr next year, he said, quote, "The Democrats' response highlights perfectly the competing views of the two parties when it comes to strengthening the economy. It's little wonder Americans want to keep their hard-earned money away from the grips of Washington." Taking your money out of the banks at the first sign of an economic crisis is somehow a noble Republican way to show those bozos in D.C.? Huh? The Republican response to the make a run on the banks scandal has been to praise the idea of making a run on the banks. I have to say, I don't feel like I could have seen this coming. Joining us now is Craig Crawford, MSNBC analyst and columnist for CQPolitics.com. Craig, thanks for coming on the show. Nice to see you.
Hi, haven't you been the Burr in Burr's saddle this week?
Well, I didn't mean to be. I just meant to report on him, and he got so mad. Well, I want to...
I think his response made more trouble for him than anything else.
Sometimes that happens when your response doesn't make sense and isn't based in fact. Tell me about this guy, though. He's got an approval rating of 35%. He has to look pretty vulnerable in 2010, right?
Well, he is. Our race raters at CQ Politics are going to launch their official trackings starting next week. And I can reveal to you right here, Rachel, that at CQ we are rating his a no clear favorite, which is basically a toss-up and remarkable for an incumbent where no formal opponent has announced.
Wow. He's running as there's no clear winner when it's him versus nobody?
Yeah, as you note, his approval ratings are down. He's losing against himself. Wow. There is the Attorney General of North Carolina, Democrat, already is ahead of him in the polls. One of the more remarkable things about his numbers, Rachel, is that so many North Carolinians don't even know him, really. He has very high numbers on that score, and that's why a story like this is so dangerous for him, because he's sort of a clean slate for a lot of voters, and this has gotten so much attention thanks to certain television hosts we know. And as a result, a lot of North Carolinians are hearing this for the first time. This is the first thing they're hearing about this guy, which is not going to be good for him.
Well, I've been watching the North Carolina press about him and the North Carolina press about this story to try to get a sense of what people think about him and how this is being received. And I know in the News Observer newspaper in North Carolina asked a finance professor at UNC Charlotte under what circumstances it would make sense to run to the bank and get cash. And the response from him that they printed was, I quote, "I don't know, maybe simultaneous nuclear attacks on Washington, Chicago, San Francisco, and Charlotte? Can I think of anything short of that? No." I mean, this would imply that this is not going over well for him in his own hometown press.
Not at all. You know, I have tried to figure out what he meant, why he was using this story. And as you noted, this wasn't a one-time thing. He'd been using it a lot. I think here's what's going on, Rachel. As with many Republicans who voted for Bush's bailout plan for the banks back last fall, they are now in big trouble with conservative voters. So they're trying to explain that vote, explain it away. This was his rather weak attempt at trying to show his frame of mind at the time as to why he voted for that bank bailout, that he was panicking about the economy. So I guess that you would call that an insanity defense. I don't know, what, or at least a crime of passion that he's trying to argue to these conservative voters who are now so mad about that bailout.
Well, it seems like it could get worse, too. I mean, the way that this particular scandal could get worse is if there's evidence that he acted one way privately to protect his own family, the way he described in this anecdote, but he told his constituents to do something different about that. Now, is there any evidence of that thus far?
Well, I did wander around his website today when we knew we were going to talk about this story and started looking at his press releases back in those days. And lo and behold, he issued a very calm and reasoned press release about the bank problems in North Carolina, assuring everyone that everything was fine and counseling against panic. Of course, we now know he was writing that calm and reasonable press release under his bed, cash stuffed with cash in his mattress or something. He did have a very different public statement than what he was saying on the phone to his wife.
Oh, well, we will get our hands on that press release and do what we can to let folks know.
Now,
Craig.
don't let him challenge you to a duel, because he claims to be a distant relative of Aaron Burr.
Oh, yeah, that's bad history. Craig Crawford, yeah. MSNBC analyst, columnist for CQPolitics.com. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for doing your homework on this one, Craig. It's nice to see you.
You bet.